Now that we've seen how to take out a color cast from an image, let's go ahead and take a look at how to adjust the color balance of an image to maybe shift it more towards a warm or cool side of the spectrum. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this image up by using Control W on the PC, Command W on the Mac. I'll go ahead and say, no, don't save those changes. And now I've got open hardstare.jpg. That's located in your Chapter 5 project files folder. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to take this image and we're going to warm it up and we're going to cool it down using the color balance controls here inside of PhotoshopCS3. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up to the image menu, this time choosing adjustments and selecting color balance. So we're going to be brought into the color balance dialog box now, and I'll kind of move this out of the way so we can see the main portion of the image. And what we're going to do inside of here is essentially shift this image to one side of the spectrum or the other, meaning if we wanted to warm it up or cool it down, we could do so. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type in some numbers here. For instance, I'm going to type in 25 so that it goes more towards the red end of the spectrum. And you'll notice when I do that, this slider moves to the right as well. Now you can drag these sliders manually or you can enter in values based on your personal preference. I prefer to enter in values simply because it's in my opinion that you need to leave this middle slider where it is because you don't want to mess with the overall magenta or green tone when you're shifting between warm and cool. You only want to adjust cyan to red and blue to yellow, simply because those are the main hues that affect warmth and cool tones. So another thing I suggest is that whatever you put in this dialog box, you put the exact opposite in this dialog box. So if you have 25 here, put negative 25 in here. And that way you'll be able to get more of an accurate color balance inside of your image. So now we're moving this color balance more towards the red side of the spectrum, and you'll notice that right over here in the image window it's going to get a lot more red or a lot more warm. In this case he was already a little bit warm, so it's not really showing up as much as we might like. So let's go ahead and we'll push this maybe towards the cool side just to give you more of an idea of exactly how this works. Let's go ahead and we'll type this in. We'll type in 75 for this value and we'll type in negative 75 for the first color level there. And you'll notice there we've effectively turned that into a really cool image. So we've taken that warm tone completely out of it. Now this is a great thing, especially if you have images that are really too warm. You could bring them in here and just tone them down this way. So this is an effective way of essentially adjusting the temperature of images that you have brought into Photoshop just by entering in the values here. This is very similar to the temperature and tint sliders that you have inside of Camera Raw. So for those of you who are not comfortable editing in Camera Raw, I would suggest that you use this color balance tool here inside of PhotoshopCS3. However, if you feel comfortable inside of Camera Raw, my recommendation is to use Camera Raw to edit your JPEGs and or TIFFs, simply because of the fact that you get a little bit more control. I think the interface gives you a lot more visual feedback, which is very helpful. In this case, you have to wait until you enter these values and whatnot, and you'd have to adjust one slider and then adjust another. In Camera Raw, you simply drag one slider to the left or to the right to adjust the overall tone of the image. So what we can do also inside of this dialog box that makes it a little bit more effective than maybe the Camera Raw dialog box is the fact that we get control over all of the aspects of the image, such as shadows, highlights, and midtones, and we can target those individually. So for instance, right now we're working on the midtones, so that's what has given us this broad, cooler adjustment to this image. But if I wanted to maybe warm up the highlights a little bit, I could do that simply by coming in here. Let's just type in, we'll type in 25, and we'll type in negative 25 for that last value. And you can see there, everywhere in the image that holds those highlights has just been warmed up a little bit. Now, if I wanted to cool those off even more so that they match that original adjustment that I made, I could go ahead, let's type in maybe 50 for this, and we'll type in negative 50 for this. So remember, we're always trying to balance out those values up there. That's why we call this color balance, because you want it to be balanced on both sides of the spectrum. So what we've done now is we've effectively cooled off those highlight areas, and we're still a little warm in the shadows. So if I wanted to come over here and adjust the shadows, I can do the exact same thing here. So let's type in negative 75 there, and we'll type in 75 there. So now we have an unbelievably cooled down image. There's almost no warm tones in this image at all. And when we're doing this, you see here, we're getting some serious color distortions. This is why you need to be really careful when you're adjusting color balance, simply because if you take it to these extremes, instead of keeping it right around that neutral point where we had it originally, you're really going to start to get some distortions. You see here we're getting some like extreme aqua looking colors up here on his forehead, and we're really starting to get pixelated as well. We're starting to show some serious JPEG artifacts that are associated with color halos and different things like that. So you really need to be careful when you're entering in these values so as not to destroy certain aspects of your photograph. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up and I'm going to hold down my Option or Alt key on my keyboard, and I'm going to reset all these values just to get us back to the original image here. So that's the easy way to go ahead and reset these if you're having problems with your image and you really don't know how to get back to where you need to be. Just go ahead and hold down that Option or Alt key and you'll automatically be able to then reset it to exactly where it was when you first started your color balance. I'm going to also switch back to the midtones, and we're just going to go ahead and cool this image off again. So I'm going to type in right here, we're going to type in -50, and for this one we'll type in 50 just to give it an overall cooler tone. And we've also pretty much effectively removed that uber orange color cast that we've got there. So now if I click OK, you see here we've got a fairly well color corrected image here. But in the very next lesson I'm going to show you how exactly to color correct this image by the numbers.